They told you this day would never come. They told you Republicans would never turn on Donald Trump. They told you his grip on the party was unbreakable, absolute, permanent. But tonight, that lie has collapsed in real time. Because what we are watching right now is not just criticism, it is not just concern, it is not just anonymous leaks or quiet frustration behind closed doors. This is an open revolt. Republican senators are now publicly warning that Donald Trump has crossed a line so dangerous, so reckless, and so destabilizing that it threatens the very foundation of the U.S. economy. And the trigger for this political earthquake is Trump's escalating, openly political attack on Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, an attack that has now backfired spectacularly. For the first time in years, Republicans are not circling the wagons. They are drawing lines. They are threatening to block nominees. They are questioning the legitimacy of Trump's Justice Department, and they are doing it out loud. And here's the most important part. This isn't about Jerome Powell as a person. This isn't even about interest rates. This is about power, retribution, and whether the United States is still governed by institutions or by the personal grudges of one man. Let's start with the moment everything snapped. Late last night, Jerome Powell did something almost unheard of for a Federal Reserve chair. He went directly to the American people, calm, measured, no theatrics, no politics, just facts. He warned that the independence of the Federal Reserve, the very thing that keeps the dollar stable, markets functional, and inflation expectations anchored, is now under threat. That alone should tell you how serious this is. The Fed does not speak like this unless the house is on fire. Powell didn't accuse, he didn't posture. He didn't attack Trump by name, but everyone understood exactly what he meant. Because at the same time Powell was trying to reassure markets, Donald Trump was doing the opposite, signaling to his allies, his base, and his Justice Department that Powell should be punished. Not replaced, not criticized, punished. Through criminal investigations, through lawsuits, through intimidation. And this is where Republicans began to panic, because the moment you turn the Federal Reserve into a political weapon, the game is over. Markets don't wait, investors don't debate, capital doesn't argue on cable news, it leaves. And Republican senators, many of whom have spent decades defending market stability and institutional independence, know this better than anyone. That's why Senator Thom Tillis, a Republican, did something extraordinary. He didn't hedge. He didn't soften his language. He didn't blame both sides. He said flatly that the independence and credibility of the Department of Justice itself is now in question because of Trump's actions. And then he went further. He announced he would block every Federal Reserve nominee until this legally and politically motivated attack on Powell is resolved. That is not symbolic. That is not rhetorical. That is a direct check on presidential power. And it didn't happen in a vacuum. This comes as Trump is already losing control of Congress. The House majority is shrinking by the week due to resignations. The Senate has slipped further and further out of his grasp. And now even Republican leadership knows the truth they don't want to say on camera. Donald Trump is sliding into lame duck status faster than anyone expected. Midterms are approaching. Internal polling is brutal. And the coalition that once protected him is cracking. That's why this Powell attack is so revealing. Because Trump didn't need to do this. He chose to. He chose escalation over restraint. He chose revenge over stability. He chose intimidation over governance. And in doing so, he forced Republicans to choose between Trump and the economy. For years, they avoided that choice. Not anymore. Because this attack exposes what the Trump presidency has become. A system where loyalty matters more than law. And institutions exist only to serve one man. That's why so many Republicans are suddenly speaking out, not because they've discovered morality, but because they've discovered risk. The dollar is strong because the Fed is independent. Treasuries are trusted because politics doesn't set interest rates. The U.S. economy functions because global markets believe adults are still in charge. Trump is threatening all of that. And here's the part his defenders can't explain away. If Jerome Powell were truly incompetent, Trump wouldn't need investigations. He wouldn't need lawsuits. He wouldn't need DOJ pressure. Markets would have already punished him, but they haven't. In fact, the opposite is happening. Every time Trump attacks Powell, markets brace. Every time Trump signals retaliation, volatility rises. Every time Trump threatens independence, confidence drops. That's why Republicans are nervous, because this isn't strength, it's desperation. Trump knows he's losing institutional control. He knows Senate Republicans are slipping away. He knows he can't fire Powell without triggering a market meltdown. So he's doing what he always does. He's trying to scare people into submission. But intimidation only works when people believe you're untouchable. And that illusion is breaking. You can see it in the numbers. You can see it in the resignations. You can see it in the Senate statements. You can see it in how carefully Republican leaders now phrase their defenses, if they defend him at all. This is what a political collapse looks like before it becomes obvious. And it's happening because Trump overplayed his hand. He thought attacking Powell would rally his base. He thought it would force compliance. He thought Republicans would fall in line like they always do. Instead, it exposed something far more dangerous for him, that even his own party understands the cost of letting a gangster state replace a constitutional one. And once that realization sets in, loyalty evaporates fast, because no one wants to be holding the bag when the economy breaks. And this is only the beginning. In the next section, we're going to break down why this Powell attack mirrors Trump's past purges, why Republicans see the pattern now, and why this time the consequences are far bigger than Trump realizes. This revolt didn't start loud, but it's about to get very real. What Republicans are reacting to right now isn't just one reckless decision. It's a pattern they recognize all too well, because we've seen this movie before. When Donald Trump feels threatened, he doesn't course correct. He doesn't self-reflect. He doesn't compromise. He retaliates. He goes after the person standing in his way, discredits them, pressures institutions to bend, and dares everyone else to stop him. That strategy worked when the targets were individuals: FBI directors, inspectors general, prosecutors, career civil servants. It worked when the damage felt abstract, distant, technical. But Jerome Powell is different. The Federal Reserve isn't just another agency. It's the beating heart of the global financial system. And the moment Trump turned his retribution playbook on the Fed, Republicans understood something terrifying. This time, the blast radius includes everyone. This is why the comparison to James Comey keeps coming up. Not because Comey was universally admired, he wasn't. Not because Powell is above criticism, he isn't. But because both moments reveal the same instinct. Trump doesn't remove obstacles. He seeks to punish them. And punishment is not governance. When Trump fired Comey, Republicans told themselves it was a one-off. When he pressured DOJ officials, they said it was unconventional. When he demanded loyalty oaths, they said it was just Trump being Trump. But the Powell situation strips away all plausible deniability. You cannot intimidate a central bank and pretend you care about markets. You cannot threaten criminal investigations and claim neutrality. You cannot undermine monetary independence and still call yourself pro-business. And Republicans know this. That's why the reaction isn't just rhetorical outrage, it's institutional resistance, blocking Fed nominees, questioning DOJ legitimacy, refusing to carry out presidential demands. That is not normal dissent. That is a party preparing for containment. Because the unspoken fear inside Republican leadership right now is this: Trump is turning them into accomplices. If they stay silent while the Fed is attacked, they own the consequences. If markets crash, they can't blame Democrats. If capital flees, they can't blame regulation. If inflation expectations spike, they can't blame Powell. They will be blamed. And for career politicians, especially senators who still care about legacy donors and history, that is unacceptable. This is why more Republicans are breaking ranks now after years of loyalty. It's not courage, it's self-preservation. Trump's attacks on Powell are openly political. He's not hiding it. He's telegraphing it just like he always does. He's signaling to his base that Powell is the enemy, that interest rates are a conspiracy, that institutions are sabotaging him. But that message lands very differently in boardrooms, bond markets, and foreign capitals. To investors, it sounds like chaos. To allies, it sounds like instability. To adversaries, it sounds like opportunity. And Senate Republicans understand something Trump doesn't. Perception matters as much as reality. The mere perception that the Fed is no longer independent is enough to cause damage. You don't need Powell fired. You don't need a conviction. You don't even need charges. All you need is doubt. Doubt that interest rates are set on data. Doubt that the dollar is insulated from politics. Doubt that the U.S. government still respects its own guardrails. That doubt gets priced in immediately. That's why Powell's direct address mattered so much. It wasn't about defending himself, it was about defending the system. And that's why Republicans felt cornered, because Powell did what Trump wouldn't. He put the country first. And in doing so, he exposed Trump's motivations. This isn't about inflation. It isn't about construction costs. It isn't about competence. It's about control. Trump has spent months publicly attacking Powell, accusing him of sabotage, accusing him of favoritism, accusing him of incompetence, all while floating the idea of legal action. This wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated. And Republicans see the danger now because they see where it leads. If Trump can criminalize monetary policy disagreements, what can't he criminalize? If DOJ can be deployed against the Fed, who's next? Congressional critics, governors, judges? This is where the gangster state language starts to make sense. Because in a gangster system, institutions don't matter. Loyalty does, fear does, intimidation does, and that model collapses economies fast. Trump's defenders love to say he's a businessman, but businessmen understand risk. They understand confidence. They understand that the perception of stability is often more valuable than brute force. Trump's approach does the opposite. He weaponizes uncertainty. He thrives on disruption. He believes fear equals leverage. But markets don't respond to fear with obedience. They respond with exits. This is why the money matters. You can rally a base with rhetoric. You can intimidate staff with threats. You can bully lawmakers with primaries, but you cannot bully capital. Money doesn't care about your rallies. It doesn't care about your insults. It doesn't care about your grievances. It goes where it's treated predictably. And that's why Republicans are alarmed, because Trump's power has always depended on the illusion that he's good for the economy, that he's a market guy, that he understands growth. This Powell attack shatters that illusion. It tells the world Trump is willing to burn down economic credibility to settle scores. And once that message lands, donors hesitate, investors hedge, allies distance themselves. This is how political isolation begins. And Republicans feel it. They feel it when donors call asking what the plan is. They feel it when business leaders go quiet. They feel it when international partners stop returning calls. This isn't theoretical anymore. You're seeing Republican senators openly discuss blocking Trump's agenda. You're seeing them break on foreign policy. You're seeing them split on health care. You're seeing them challenge executive overreach. That didn't happen overnight. It happened because Trump accelerated his own collapse. Instead of consolidating power as his margins shrank, he lashed out. Instead of stabilizing, he escalated. Instead of reassuring markets, he threatened them. And now he's paying the price. What makes this moment so dangerous for Trump is that it's not driven by ideology. It's driven by fear of consequences. Republicans will tolerate almost anything as long as it doesn't cost them elections or money. Trump is now costing them both. And once that calculation flips, loyalty evaporates. This is why the word lame duck is being whispered louder every day. Not because Trump has officially lost power, but because everyone is acting like he's about to. And in politics, perception often becomes reality. In the next section, we're going to talk about the broader fallout, how this revolt ties into corruption accusations, economic fraud, and why Democrats are finally learning how to fight Trump on his own terrain. Because what's happening right now isn't just a GOP revolt. It's the beginning of accountability Trump never expected. What's happening now goes beyond Jerome Powell, beyond interest rates, and beyond a single investigation. This is about exposure. Because once you pull on one thread of Trump's power structure, the whole fabric starts to unravel. For years, Donald Trump survived not because his actions were defensible, but because they were overwhelming. Constant controversy, endless noise, a flood of scandals so relentless that accountability drowned in exhaustion. The strategy worked because opponents kept responding with outrage instead of consequence. But something has shifted. The Powell attack didn't just anger economists. It didn't just spook markets. It created a moment where Republicans, Democrats, donors, and institutions all saw the same thing at the same time. A president willing to destabilize the economy for personal revenge. And once that reality becomes clear, the conversation changes. Now it's no longer about whether Trump is norm-breaking, it's about whether he's a liability. That's why you're seeing Republicans do something they avoided for nearly a decade, drawing red lines. They're not defending Powell because they love him. They're not defending the Fed because they're suddenly virtuous. They're defending themselves because they understand that Trump's behavior now threatens to drag them down with him. Let's talk about corruption, not as a buzzword, but as a system. Trump's presidency has always blurred the line between public office and private enrichment. From day one, the message was clear. Loyalty gets rewarded, resistance gets punished, and institutions exist to serve the boss. That model worked politically for a while, but economically, it's poison. When Trump threatens tariffs to manipulate markets, that's not strategy, that's coercion. When he uses regulatory power to reward allies, that's not leadership, that's favoritism. When he attacks the Fed to influence interest rates, that's not policy, and that's interference. And Republicans are finally realizing that they can't keep pretending this is normal, because the costs are becoming visible. Markets don't crash all at once anymore. They fray. Confidence erodes. Risk premiums rise quietly. Investors pull back slowly, then suddenly. And by the time politicians notice, the damage is already done. That's why this moment matters. Trump's defenders love to argue that nothing bad has happened yet, that the sky hasn't fallen, that markets are still open. But that's not how economic collapse works. It happens when trust disappears, and trust is built on rules, not personalities. This is why the Fed's independence is sacred, not because central bankers are geniuses, but because they are insulated. They make decisions based on data, not demands. And the world trusts that firewall. Trump wants to tear it down. And Republicans know that once it's gone, you don't get it back easily. That's why senators are now questioning the credibility of Trump's Justice Department. Because if DOJ becomes a political weapon, then no institution is safe. Not courts, not agencies, not Congress itself. And this is where Democrats come back into the picture. For a long time, Democrats tried to fight Trump with decorum, with norms, with appeals to morality, and it failed. Trump doesn't respond to shame. He responds to pressure. That's why voices inside the Democratic Party are now saying openly, it's time to stop playing defense. When Trump accuses others of fraud, expose his. When Trump threatens investigations, demand consequences. When Trump uses intimidation, name it, clearly and repeatedly. Because the only thing that slows a bully is resistance that carries cost. That's why corruption narratives are becoming central again. Not as partisan attacks, but as explanations. Why does Trump attack Powell? Because Powell won't bend. Why does Trump target critics? Because fear keeps others in line. Why does Trump lash out at institutions? Because institutions limit him. Once you see the pattern, it becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't chaos by accident. It's chaos as a tool. But tools can break. And right now, Trump's favorite weapon, disruption, is turning against him. Republicans are breaking because they see where this ends. They see midterms coming. They see shrinking margins. They see donors hedging. They see international confidence wavering. And most importantly, they see a president who no longer expands their power, but consumes it. That's why some Republicans are finally willing to oppose him publicly, not because they've changed, but because the cost of silence is now higher than the cost of dissent. This is how revolts begin in political parties, not with grand speeches, not with moral awakenings, but with survival instincts. When senators block nominees, that's not symbolic, it's structural resistance. When lawmakers question DOJ credibility, that's not rhetoric, it's a warning. When Republicans split on foreign policy, healthcare, and economic governance, that's fragmentation. And fragmentation is fatal to authoritarian power. Trump's strength was always the illusion of unity, the belief that no one would ever stand up to him. That belief is cracking. And once it shatters, everything changes. Because Trump's base may remain loyal, but bases don't run economies. Institutions do, and institutions are pushing back. That's why this moment matters more than any single headline. It's not just that Republicans are turning on Trump. It's that they're doing it when it counts, where power actually lives. Not on cable news, not on social media, but in confirmations, in budgets, in legal legitimacy. Trump can rage, he can threaten, he can insult, but he cannot force markets to trust him. He cannot force institutions to obey him forever, and he cannot bully his way past reality. This Powell attack was supposed to show strength. Instead, it revealed weakness. It showed a president trapped by his own impulses, a party forced to choose between loyalty and survival, and a system finally starting to resist. This is what the beginning of accountability looks like. Not dramatic, not clean, but real. And the reason it scares Trump so much is simple. Once the revolt starts, it doesn't stop on command, because power, once questioned, is never the same again. And for the first time in a long time, Donald Trump is no longer controlling the narrative. He's reacting to it. And that may be the most dangerous position he's been in yet.